Hey everyone, this is Christopher Luxon, the former CEO of Air New Zealand.
This is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire.
This is Tracy Ibarra. I'm in Executive Solutions at Dell Technologies.
This is Travis Chappell, founder of Build Your Network. If you are wanting to learn how to embrace change,
To navigate through disruption as a leader,
then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast.
The Leadership is Changing podcast.
the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend,
my very good friend, Dennis Giannoutsos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsos.
Sure. So when I talk about my career, I kind of always hear that one line from the Beatles song, The Long and Winding Road, right, playing in my head. My first job out of college was as a school picture photographer and as a territory sales rep. And so I kind of grew up in sales. So I sort of fell into leading sales training programs almost by accident. I joke sometimes that I got into sales training because I can write a complete sentence. I earned a degree in English. One of the things that happened after doing some sales training was I moved into program management during a period of major consolidation in the wireless telecom industry. So we went through 6 mergers and acquisitions in 18 months in the company that I was working for, and I was a program manager in that environment. After that, I shifted back into sales operations and marketing roles, where I really remained focused on learning and development and enablement. I've really only been in HR for the past 6 years or so.
Right. Okay. And so how did you actually get into leadership itself?
Yeah. So, the M&A work that I did as a program manager, it was incredibly rewarding. I never wanted to be a people manager, right? I loved doing the program management, the relationship management. I saw the thing I saw during that experience, though, was that the effects that good leaders could have on their teams and on culture and on developing, other people in an M&A environment. There's always so many heightened emotions and so much conflict. I really saw how good managers were able to navigate that. And unfortunately, I also saw the reverse. So, when an opportunity came up to build a team of my own, sort of from the ground up, I really leapt at that chance, and I've never looked back. I've had a great time managing teams and developing other people.
Yeah, isn't it awesome to experience that, especially the merger and acquisition side of things and that. But then the other side is people, right? And from me, it sounds like from from what you're sharing so far is there's that passion to work with people, build relationships and that. But then the other side, life will be so much simpler without people as well, I think. And and with a lot of leaders, today, they do struggle. And a lot of them, sort of, as I said, go from email to email, meeting to meeting. They do struggle and they're overwhelmed and they come across as really quite cranky or don't look after the people very well at all. So it's interesting to see that. Hey, Rebekah, in the introduction I did for you, there is what we talk about, your passion, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so forth. How important is diversity?
I think it is absolutely critical. The Leadership is Changing is the title of your podcast, and I think the ways that leadership is changing are really being driven by what's happening in the world today around division, equity, inclusion, and the recognition that the world isn't what it should be in a lot of those areas. I have a special needs daughter who's on the autism spectrum, and I look at the experiences around neurodiversity in particular. We tend to think about race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, sort of those as the main categories of diversity. And, I've really come to understand neurodiversity is a huge part of that. One of the really interesting things that happened to me recently, I was in a class and I was sitting with a group of people who were talking about diversity in their group. And, one gentleman said, I grew up in San Jose. I, started work at a Silicon Valley company. I sit around a table like this and it's nothing but diversity, right? In the group that he was in, he said, right. But from a thought perspective, all of the people at that table, whether they were Asian, Black, whatever, they went to Stanford, Harvard, Yale. There was no diversity of thought. Right? Because they all came from very similar life experiences. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective to bring to the table, because if you just think about diversity in terms of gender or ethnicity, you're missing a huge piece of that spectrum, right?
Okay. And so what do you think companies should do to sort of pick up the rest of that spectrum? What else should they do?
Yeah, so I think there's a few key things that they can do that a lot of companies are already doing in terms of hiring, right? Not just looking for talent from specific colleges or universities, not just looking for male or female talent, really trying to bring in a broad group and broad representation from the broader community. The other thing that I think is on leaders less than it is on companies is to push themselves to have diverse teams, right? And diversity in many forms, not just ethnicity or gender, right? And, there's studies that show that sort of diversity is, it doesn't feel good because you're not in an environment where people are like you. Right. And so it always feels like the work is harder, but the outcomes are better. Right. And so I think leaders have an obligation to really think about who is it that I'm putting on this project team, or who is it that I'm bringing into my own team, and what are the different perspectives that they will bring that will help us be better. So
Yeah. So I think it'd be a rich experience for both the individuals, but also for the leaders as well, by the sounds of it, if they do go down that track and think about things a little bit more. But I mean, that's probably a novel idea, probably for a lot of leaders, is to take time out to think.
Yes.
Yeah. So that'd be pretty cool for them to do that.
Yeah, because there's such a like bias in leadership, right? If you have a team of people and you have a project that needs to get done, you tend to hand it off to the people who are like you, because you have a higher degree of trust that they're going to get the job done. And I think we have to take a step back from that as leaders and say, okay, is this project something that I would struggle with? If so, then handing it to somebody who would handle it like I would is probably not the right solution.
No, probably get the same result. Yeah.
They would probably get the same result. They would probably have the same frustrations that I would have. Right. So really thinking about the problem and who is the best suited person to solve that problem. If I need somebody who's deeply analytical because it's a deeply analytical problem, I'm not going to pick somebody like me.
Yeah, and do you think it's for a leader to be able to go and do that? That's quite bold, and they'll have to have courage sometimes to be able to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And they have to know their teams, right? If you don't know your team and you don't know the strengths of the people on your team, or even the strengths of people outside of your team that you could bring in, you're going to fail, right? You have to know your people and their strengths.
There you go, leaders. There's the challenge. You've got to know your team. You've got to know others outside of your team and their strengths, and bring that into your team, or even to projects, initiatives, and things like that. But, be bold. Have the courage to be able to go out and do that, which is wonderful, what Rebekah is sharing here with us today.
Yeah, a little bit about my background. So I love business. That's my thing. I really do love business. Grew up in a family where business wasn't the thing. It was going and getting a job and doing that sort of stuff. But I always had a passion. I saw my uncles, or no, my grandfather, my great grandfather. They owned farms, and they worked really hard and were very successful. And then I went to school, and I didn't really enjoy school, but I didn't mind hard work, because I'd go to the farms and I'd work hard. And my dad, he was in one job for 47 years at the freezing works, and And I didn't really I wasn't really around business people at all. But as soon as I got into sales and marketing, I kind of saw that there was another way forward. And really, went to school to eat my lunch and play cricket. And I wasn't really a good reader. I kind of didn't understand why you had to read certain books that I couldn't even pronounce the words, like some of the Shakespeare stuff and some of the, Animal Farm and all this sort of stuff. So I didn't read a lot. And my life kind of changed when I was actually in London. I was working for a guy who had a building company where me and my friend Dean had made him a lot of money, and he invited us to come to Spain for the Christmas holidays. And he said, he said, look, we're going to go to the bookstore and we'll get some books because, there's obviously a number of things to do, but, probably want to read a book. And I was like, Sonny, there's no way I'm reading a book. And we went to the bookstore anyway. And he said something that changed my life. And it was like, Scott, look, you can choose any book you want to read. And, all through my schooling career and all that sort of stuff, I was told what to read.
Right.
And, I don't know about you, but as a business owner, I don't like being told what to do all the time. But it made a profound difference. And it was really interesting. I wasn't really into basketball at all, but all my mates had played basketball. But I saw this book by Dennis Rodman, As Bad as I Want to Be. And he played for the Bulls. And he was kind of like the guy that was different. And I read this book and it just opened my eyes to another world that was out there and how you could actually educate yourself on everything that you wanted just by reading books. And that led my passion for reading books and got me into sales and marketing, got me to where I am today. And, I think Sonny, for that time, he really did change my life. He probably didn't even know that, but it really has made a significant difference.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting way that you're putting it, because for a lot of leaders today, whether they're an entrepreneur, they have their own business, or they're in a large corporate, whatever it is, what we say and what we do does have impact on people and has impact on people for life. And so I think the example you talked about there with Sonny and giving you that sort of feedback or helping you and encouraging you was really quite cool. Yeah.
It opened up another world, that's for sure, right?
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, cool. Hey, have you? How did you get into leadership? How did you get into that whole space of?
So back in the day when I left, I was working for a large corporate, and I was actually looking after a group of resellers throughout New Zealand, and sort of managing groups of people. They were business owners themselves. But then I sort of wanted to start my own business. And the interesting thing is, when I started my own business, I actually never really wanted to have any team members. And it was kind of like I was going to do this by myself. And in my first business, that's what I did, and I grew that. But then I realized as I got into my second business, there was no way it was going to grow without having people on board. And so that was a big shift for me, like to get into the actual having other people around, because and now, like, I wouldn't have it any other way, right? But at the time it was like, I didn't really want to do anything with people, so yeah.
Life will be so much simpler without people, hey?
I do really enjoy it now, though. Like it's a complete turnaround. I wouldn't have it any other way. But that's definitely how I got into it. And I had a search engine optimization business. We were doing a lot of stuff with Google, and we were hiring people, really smart people, and we just had to hire them and then leave them to it, which was challenging, to say the least, sometimes,
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, and that's what we said in your introduction, right? Hire the best people you can find and then get out of their way. And I think that's getting out of their way is a big thing, right? Because we can get in their way, and we have to definitely get out of their way for sure. Hey, Scott, who's your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
I love, Jim Rohn was a real leader for me. And I really, the reason I loved it was his philosophies were so simple. Work harder on yourself than you do in your job. It was like, that's something that really sung to me, like work harder on yourself. Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. And so he has led me over the years. Never met him personally, but have met him, through my ears and through the written book. He was someone that really led me. And what I liked about what he was talking about is he talked about things and gave stories and examples and metaphors. And I really like his thinking and how he would challenge you. And I think that's what, as a leader, that's one of your jobs, is to challenge people as well. So Jim Rohn for me would be someone who really stood out. I still to this day love listening to him. You know,
I love the way he speaks, and then his voice and the way he says things towards the end of a sentence. It's really
of course.
Yeah, tremendous.
Because he his mindset, and I think as a leader, that's something that you should be sharpening as much as you can. You know, you know, your mindset and bringing what you bring to the game. So Jim Rohn, world class.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.